Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read another chapter of Squeaky. We're continuing with Aftermath. After finishing his business at state capitol, President Ford returned to the Senator Hotel, traveling this time by armored limousine. At 12:45 p.m., the president made a statement to the press. Although he had been gamely pressing onward through the day, Ford looked drawn and deadly serious under the harsh television lights. Let me say emphatically that I think the Secret Service and the other law enforcement agencies that were on the job were doing a superb job. The president began, his monotone so deliberate as to sound almost robotic. I also wish to express to the people of California my gratitude for their warm, very warm welcome that they have given me in the state of California. I would not, under any circumstances, feel that one individual in any way represented the attitude of the people of the United States or the people of California. I just thank the Californians for being so friendly and for so hospitable. Let me end with great emphasis. This incident, under no circumstances, will prevent me or preclude me from contacting the American people as I travel from one state to another and from one community to another. And in my judgment, it is vitally important for the president to see the American people, and I am going to continue to have that personal contact and relationship with the American people. I think it is vital and his intent to carry it out. I am also sure that I ought to describe what I saw beyond the fact that I saw a hand coming up behind several others in the front row, and obviously there was a gun in the hand. I think then almost instantaneously, very quick and very effective action by the Secret Service in taking care of the matter. What was your own thought, sir? Well, Ford said, I was very thankful. I was very thankful to the Secret Service for doing their superior job. But once I saw they had done it, I thought I'd better get on with the rest of the day's schedule. Thank you very much. The president then walked back to the hotel suite, accompanied by aides already evaluating the political impact of the incident. Donald Rumsfeld speculated that Ford's popularity might rise. Much of it had been with the Maya Gayez affair earlier in the year, when the president had ordered the military rescue of an American vessel seized by communist Cambodia. Press Secretary Nesson suggested that Ford's apparent brush with death would create a wave of sympathy for the President. Ford listened more than he spoke, but agreed that politically at least, the encounter with Squeaky Farm would turn out to be helpful. He had a lunch with a delegation of Republican Party leaders from Nevada. Meanwhile, across the nation and around the world, news of the incident was striking a nerve. In Washington, First Lady Betty Ford had been in the second-floor study, a comfortable room with views of the capital city's monuments, and word came. Her telephone conversation was interrupted by Richard Kaiser, the head of the White House Secret Service detail, who so resembled President Ford that he was often mistaken for him. Kaiser first assured Mrs. Ford that her husband was safe, that told her what had happened, that it was 1:34 p.m. Eastern Time, 26 minutes after the incident, and 14 minutes after the ABC and CBS television networks had broadcast the news to Sacramento. Another agent went to the third floor of the White House to notify the Fords' two unmarried sons, 19-year-old Steve and Jack, 23. Ford's sons rushed downstairs to comfort their mother and found her calm and assured. Mrs. Ford realized the statement observing the assassination attempts are just something you have to live with when you are the first family. Vice President Rockefeller, visiting Rochester, New York, was asked by reporters if it was safe for both him and Ford to be away from Washington at the same time. It's a big country, he said gruffly, and we're both in the country. Asked for first reaction to the news from Sacramento, Rockefeller said it was, thank God, the president was all right. The president was indeed all right, but his afternoon return flight to Washington, Ford was joking with his aides about the incident and, as a memento, autographing copies of the advance plans for the walk to the state capitol. Wearing his blue presidential windbreaker and his open-necked white sports shirt, Ford puffed on his pipe and chatted casually with the reporters on the plane. The president arrived finally home at 10:50 p.m. Eastern Time. The president's helicopter, Army One, landed on the south lawn of the West House. of the White House, and Ford emerged into the round of applause from the 50-odd relatives and officials who had come to greet him, including Army General Edwin J. Levy, National Security Assistant Brent Scrowcroft, and Alan Greenspan, Chairman of the Council of Economic Affairs. Mrs. Ford gave her husband a bear hug, and Steve and Jack, both clad in blue jeans and T-shirts, threw their arms around their father's shoulders. After a second kiss from Betty, the president smiled and said, "Gee, it's good to be home." Two White House secretaries hoisted hastily lettered cardboard signs. "Well done, agents," read one. "Especially good to have you home," read another, and Ford paused to offer appropriated remarks. "He had a great trip, just a fraction of a second or two, kind of distorted things," he said. "Everything else was superb." Ford felt it necessary to assure Californians again that he didn't hold an episode against them. "I wouldn't under any circumstances let one individual's efforts undercut the warmth of what we felt in California," he said. "The incident may have lasted only a fraction of a second, but its aftermath would be of longer duration. For many Americans, the sudden prospect of losing Ford crystallized their affection for the nation's leader, even though he had not received a single vote for president. As a newspaper editorial from Salem, Oregon, put it, in the emotional aftershock comes a full realization of how important President Gerald Ford and his family had become to the countrymen, regardless of his political persuasion. The Baltimore Sun lamented the handgun that failed to shoot President Ford nonetheless damaged everyone. How much worse had it gone off? Said Howard K. Smith of ABC News, "No single event of the year has been so chilling as the apparent attempt on the president's life." Already the first of thousands of telegrams, letters, greeting cards, gifts, and telephone calls were flooding to the White House, expressing concern for the welfare of the president. One of the earliest to arrive was a handwritten note from President Ford's predecessor, Richard Nixon. Then living in his former Western White House, the Sacramento estate known as Casa Pacifica, made no public statement about the events in Sacramento, even as his own security detail was reinforced. To Ford, however, he wrote, "You handled the incident with superb poise and calm courage." Betty commented, "Also on the mark. Pat joined in sending our best." Shortly after writing this note, Nixon went to play golf in a San Clemente green. As usual, he waved to the attractive young woman who overlooked the golf course, and she waved back. Neither Nixon nor his security service squad knew much about the woman. She was the former Nora Lynn Stevens, who had once been Lynette Fromey's best friend. Telegrams arrived from the famous and the obscure alike, sent by figures ranging from the UN Secretary General Kurt Waldhelm to the Premier of tiny Antigua, the British colony of the Caribbean. The Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev sent the Politburo felicitations. "My colleagues and I feel indignant into the attempt of your life," he wrote. "We are deeply revealed that this criminal act failed and you are unhurt." Some foreign leaders use the incident as an occasion to remind the president of their own particular interests. The Taiwanese ambassador, still stringing over the Nixon's recognition of communist China, wrote to tell Ford, "How happy we feel that you were not hurt in a dastardly attempt on your life by a female fanatic." Ford's composure was most inspiring and brought great consolation to all the people of the free world, especially to all free Chinese. The ambassador added. Other diplomats went running to their phrase books to find the best words to describe Lynette Fromey's and her act. "Dastardly" was the clear favorite chosen by President Park Chung-hee of South Korea, the Shah of Iran, the President of Liberia, and the Cypriot ambassador, among others. To the ambassadors of Honduras, Lynn was monstrous. Tunisia's president preferred absurd. "Cowardly," said the ambassador of India. The Italian president favored deplorable. The Somali ambassador insane. Prime Minister treacherous. Ambassador Hirohito of Japan condemned Lynn's act as outrageous, with both the Prime Minister of Mauritius and the Vatican apostolic delegate chose senseless. The Spanish ambassador representing Generalissimo Francisco Franco said behavior like Lynn's imperils of the very foundations of our society and dampens the sound efforts of man's toward progress, justice, and better understanding among all men and all nations. The Iranian ambassador had red roses delivered to the White House and received a thank you note from Mrs. Ford. One nation, however, couldn't resist a comment into the behavior of its former colony. I hope you will not mind me sending you a personal message to express my heartfelt relief at your escape from the dastardly attempt made on you, wrote British Prime Minister James Callaghan. America has been spared yet another self-inflicted wound. At home, American began to sort out the significance of the incident. When the news reached the House of Representatives, Congressman James P. Johnson interrupted a committee meeting chaired by Tom Foley. Mr. Chairman, the Colorado Republican said, I think the record should know that for the first time since McKinley, we have a Republican president worth shooting. And I think that's a good sign. Laughter followed. Friday evening, the Reverend Billy Graham had 35,000 faithful at Lubbock, Texas Tech University to pray for Ford and his family. The next day, they wrote to remind the president of their lasting meeting at the White House, where they had discussed Psalm 91:11. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. In Sacramento, for a brief moment, you dared stare death in the face. To pass the road, it can happen so quickly. That is why the scripture, time after time, admonishes us to live holy and righteous lives, because it is appointed unto man to die, and after that, the judgment. The apocalypse aside, Graham offered Ford some reassurance. I am certain that the Lord led President Nixon to nominate you for vice president. You are exactly the right man in the right place at the moment in American history. Prominent citizens were quick to express their concerns. Leon Jaworski, the Watergate special prosecutor whose efforts had helped drive Nixon from office, sends his regards to Ford. Petroleum executive Armand Hammer, facing felony charges for making illegal contributions to Nixon's 1972 campaign, told Ford he prayed for him, and you serve America in a time of great difficulty and equally great opportunity. Although Ford sent Dear Armand replied, the president did not intervene in the prosecution, and Hammer entered a guilty plea on October 1st. George Wallace sent a telegram to the president, but neither Wallace nor the White House would reveal its contents. Contrary to speculation, it included a little that could cause controversy. The Alabamian expressed his relief at Ford's personal safety after a tragic accident, including with God's blessing to you and your family. Ford replied, I am sure that, better than most, you can understand the depth of my gratitude. Lynn had finally made an impact on the American psyche. Soldiers stationed around the world wrote Ford to thank him for the inspiring example of grace under fire. Californians apologized to Ford for his ultimate and fortunate experience in their state. Clergy of all faiths sent their prayers. Sister Mary Colideth of St. Jose's Holy Family Mother House enclosed a list of astonishing coincidences between Lincoln and Kennedy. Another religious figure, Pat Robertson, showed his concern by booking a purported former Manson family member onto his television program, The 700 Club. The woman, identified as the otherwise unknown Anya Sipe, told Robertson's audience that Lynn was completely given over to the devil. The small town and large fraternal lodges, veterans posts, and sportsmen's organizations all sent the president their best. The Puerto Rican Free Federation of Labor, the West Coast County Board of Realtors, the Consolata Knights of Organization of Somerset, New Jersey, the Houston Golf Freeway Kiwanis Club, organizations of Somerset, New Jersey, and the Women's Afterglow Fellowship in Miami wrote of their concerns. Sue Benedict of Jackson, Michigan, sent a greeting to her sorority, Beta Sigma Phi. She enclosed a portion of her closing ritual in hopes that she will give you the strength that it has given me on many occasions. Ordinary citizens reached out. Frank Anderson of Chillian, Washington, sent his best. After describing his German Shepherd's death, After describing one of his puppies that the Ford's dog Liberty was expecting, I want you to know that a dog is more to me than an animal. He is a friend. The president replied that unfortunately, all the puppies had already been promised. I know that you would be more of a friend than just a pet, Ford wrote. From Ford's hometown, the owner of Grand Rapids Sanitary Supply Company assured the president that you are always in our prayers and that a man in the White House today will go down as the greatest president in this country had to date. Be tough on communism, he added. In Sacramento, V.J. McCambridge sent Ford a greeting card in the Rudyard Kipling poem, If and Recessional. Brent Carr of Martinville, Illinois, did one better, sending Ford a poem he himself composed to his response to Lynn. He titled it, Don't Shoot Our President. In part, the lengthy elegy read, You may not like some things he does, you may feel ignored, but all your troubles won't be solved by shooting President Ford. But just in case anything should happen to President Ford, several life insurance agents wrote to remind the chief executive of the importance of providing for loved ones. From Shawnee, Mission, Kansas, Stephen Day Carruthers and John B. Billingsley conceded that they were relatively new agents with the Lincoln National Life Insurance Company. We do not profess to be the greatest insurance agents in the industry, but we can offer something no one else can. 100% of Pat Billingsley and Steve Carruthers. The president replied that his insurance coverage was adequate. Nowhere, however, did Lynn assault have a greater impact than on the elementary school of America. In classrooms from Media, Pennsylvania to Mission Hills, California, teachers led discussions over the meaning of the incident in Sacramento. Hundreds then wrote to Ford, although the similarity of many letters suggested they had been copied from a teacher's sample written on the blackboard. I'm glad the lady didn't shoot you, wrote Tina Evans, a fifth grader from Newport, Alabama. Our teacher, Miss DeVille, told us to write this letter. We are all glad that you were not shot. Well, that's all I can think of. Few of the children drew conclusions favorable to Lynn. The 12-year-old from Atlantic City, New Jersey, observed that it's very disrespectful to try to kill the president. And Sue LaFera, age 13, of Glen Falls, New York, got right to the point. I don't think that Squeaky Fromm would at all appreciate if, say, Vice President Rockefeller shot or pointed a loaded gun at Charles Manson. Some pointed to the cheer of the president up by sending some gifts. One mailed him a Peanuts comic strip, another a dollar bill to help get those votes. White House staff returned an unsolicited contribution. From Cleveland came a greeting that embodied many of the cultural symbols of the 1970s. The letter was written on a pink sheet of paper with the words hello splashed across the top of the children's script, adorned with a small sticker and notably a string of pop rocks, the effervescent candy taped along the side. The incident led Americans to contact the president with concrete suggestions for both government policy and his personal protection. R.M. Stepanow, the public relations consultant in St. Albans, New York, wrote to Jerry Ford, feigning friendship with the chief executive in the hopes that the letter would reach the president personally. The office of the president should retain in its services men who closely resemble the president in facial features and other ways to serve as doubles. As that, at least, it can be a bit more difficult to ferret out the president as a target, thus the game of which the real Jerry Ford should serve to amuse, distract, and to protect the person of the chief executive for his and his nation's good. Most, however, thought the incident underscored the need for gun control. In this, they were joined by commentaries in newspapers across the country. The White House announced that the encounter with Lynn Fromme would have no effect on the president's opposition to gun control. Lynn was on virtually every editorial page in the country and even around the world. In Moscow, the Communist Party Daily Pravda opined that once again Americans have begun to consider the cult of violence ruling the country, while the Soviet youth newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda chided that each American up to the president continues to live in an atmosphere of uncertainty about his safety. And as before, the most important question in the shadows, where do the Mansons come from? On the other end of the political spectrum, the conservative Daily Telegraph in London condemned Lynn's act and the loose American laws that made guns so widely available. To plot on the face of the United States, the paper editorialized. The Fort Worth, Texas Star-Telegram broke tradition and ran a letter to the editor of the front page. President Ford's courage has sparked fire into my spirit, and I see hope for our country and his courage. Wrote Ramona Fletcher, the president has taught me if just one man can stand and stand strong, then others will follow. It gives me hope for my country. The editors explained the prominence given to Fletcher's views. The Star-Telegram thought this was such a non-average letter from an average American that it should be moved to page 1. So many pundits, so the most disturbing elements of the incident was that the apparent victim was an inoffensive a figure as was president could be. Hugh Sidney Times, White House columnist, was puzzled because Ford was a really serene man who should not really arouse this kind of passion in anyone. Observed in an editorial in the Boston Globe, Gerald Ford cannot be conceived as a magnet for violence. Affable, open, smiling, available, it is impossible to see him as a target of any sane person's wrath. That this man could be seriously threatened to grim comment on the extent of which social values have deteriorated. Governor Brown asked for his comment on the incident and said tersely, "It makes me move a lot faster." In Sacramento, Chief Judge Tom McBride of the Federal District Court shrugged. "Well, I suppose that will put Sacramento on the map." And over in San Quentin, Charles Manson had an uncharacteristic reaction. "Oh my God," he said in a tone prison officials described as non-committal and surprised. That's the end of that chapter. We'll continue on with chapter 9, which is called The Gun is Pointed. So if there's anything truth or relatable in this story to the modern day present world we're living in, please like, share, and subscribe, and have a nice day.